what's happening. I'll tell you what's happening here is I'm just barely upright. I may scream a little bit in this video, and I'm going to leave them in for your amusement. My back is not cooperating. I had a pretty nasty back injury in my 20s, which was kind of a rough decade for me. I actually broke my knee in a separate incident too. And every few years though I get this replay where something decides it doesn't want to work anymore in my lower back. For no real reason is the kicker, right? It's not like I was trying to deadlift 460 pounds. I was simply turned to the side for too long, apparently, while carving the neck on the cello guitar as it happens. And yes, I know you want to see that thing done. I do too. It's not like I can take 4 days off and just complete it in a row. That would require contacting 16 different individuals to reschedule the repairs, because every change affects everyone else who is waiting in line. So I have to fit it in when it fits, minute by minute sometimes, losing any sense of flow. Not how I would have it, but them's the breaks. So let's do another bass guitar, because I know you guys love those. This is an Ibanez Affirma, an A204, which is a pretty funky little model made between 1992 and 94. This is Ibanez's attempt to break into the high-end boutique bass market, which was starting to blossom around that time. Bass players, for some reason, have always been like less hidebound traditionalists than people in the guitar market. Weird shapes? Fine. Extra strings? Give them here. Odd combinations of veneer or natural woods? All better. So there have been a lot of small makers just sort of breaking into the market too, on the strength of that spirit of artistic innovation. And eventually the big companies said, okay, how can we stomp that out and make it our own? So these instruments, the Affirma series, was designed by a Swiss maker, Rolf Spuler, who was really quite something. He passed away from cancer in 2014, but there's this amazing little remembrance of him written by fellow luthier Matthias Grob on his website for Paradis Guitars. That's like Paradise, Paradis-guitars.com. It's wonderful and very Swiss. And I have to do the accent because I never get to do a Swiss accent. And I had a Swiss professor in university. It's one of the best because it has like little bits of all of Europe in it. And this is the tail end of that memorial. Rolf never managed to survive from the income he generated with his guitar. He reduced living costs to the minimum and worked all the time, but still needed sometimes financial help by his family or partner. And he used to do design jobs to maintain his guitar work. This was a humiliation he suffered all of his life and slowly made him bitter. Rolf was totally aware of the quality he was producing and the problems, so he tried many contacts to guitar companies like Ibanez, Fender, Aria, Hofner, and many smaller guitar makers, hoping to have his inventions produced in a cheaper region or bigger scale. But apart from the AFR bass, it all failed. How do we measure these things? Technical brilliance and making exactly what you want to make does not always equate with happiness. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. This bass is really beautiful. It's exceptionally light, very well balanced, some lovely walnut and maple in it. And Ibanez started making them again a couple of years ago. They've done a re-release. I really like them. This one is having action problems, which might be a consequence in part of having, it's not a neck through design, but this is a much longer than usual tenon on these. You know, neck through, well, it describes a guitar where the neck isn't detachable like a Fender or glued to the body like a Gibson. It carries through and becomes the central board of the body itself. When done right, it allows for an uninterrupted mass of sound energy to travel through. There's less internal dampening or loss of energy through having to transfer it from one piece of wood to the other through the glue or fasteners. What does that do to the tone? It definitely makes it more like a strawberry than a raspberry. But sometimes, of course, a neck wants to move. Bass necks, they're long and skinny. it happens. In this case, it seems to be bowed along its entire length, making it so that even with the saddles lowered as far as they'll go, we've got the high action. I can't take these any farther down. Action-wise, we'll see what we're starting with here. We have 10/64 on the base side of the base, and 8/64 on the less bassier side of the base. Checking out the relief, I can tell that it's massive. It's more than 20 thousandths. I've got 22 here. Yeah, somewhere around 22 thousandths. That's a lot of relief. This headstock just makes me laugh. In a good way. But that's just... it's so haphazard looking. It's crazy. I love it. Let us cross our fingers. Okay, this seems to be a 5/16 or 8mm. Let's try going backwards first, I think, actually. Oh, wow. Right. Okay. Sure. Fine. We'll do what we can. That squeaky noise is usually not a good thing. It can either be the nut, which is brass, bearing against the steel washer, or it could be the length of the truss rod revolving around in its slot. See what that did. Seemed to have some effect. Dare I do it again? Okay, more twisting and turning. 9 thousandths is as much as I want to take it. Well, I wish I could take it farther, but that's as much as I'm going to get out of the rod. 9 thousandths is okay. So with that, the action is now just about 8.5/64 on the base and about 6 on the less base. I've never taken one of these apart. We'll see what that entails. There are probably going to be individual leads to each of these, obviously, for the piezos. That's a nice little plaque. Sort of a funny collection of protuberances on the back here. That's rubber. Well, let's see what's under the cover. Yeah, okay. So they're little individual trim pots, I think, for each of the piezos. I'll put one screw back in just to hold it. Fairly large screws. Now then. Okay. So there's an individual ground wire to each of these, it seems. And there is a lead, color coded, which I'll have to find on the inside. There's the red lead. Oh, that's good. That's great. Want to see that. Hope I know where that goes to. I think this yellow lead went to this one spot on this little board here that had no wire. Green one seems to be kind of holding on tentatively as well. How does that connect in here? Doesn't look like something I would want to mess with from that side. Oh, this could be fun. Let me research. Okay, cut to an hour later. Research has been done. Anecdotal accounts have been received. There are times that I'm happy to fool around with boards like this. This one, however, is now 34 years old. It's got some specialized connectors and components that apparently get very fragile and enjoy breaking. So, if something happens to this, the chances of me being able to find a direct replacement? No. So I'm going to do something that will confound and upset a certain small segment of the population, in that I'm going to be cutting these connections mid-length. Yeah, there's plenty of wire. They'll go back together just fine. Much less risky. I figure the upside of leaving this thing entirely alone is worth a little bit of visible shrink tubing in the end product. So there. Remember, I don't read the comments section. Now, these saddles, of course, sit below the top surface, and there's a nice grunge mark on them there. They're currently sitting, I guess, about 3.5 millimeters below the surface. I'm going to want almost that much again. So, yeah, that's okay. There's still going to be some exposed on the top. Want to make sure that this pickup has enough room to travel down, because you might end up having to excavate that too. But I think we'll be okay. I don't see a reason why making these things that much deeper should cause an issue. Except for the detuner, which has a little bit gouged out here on the side. I might have to make that deeper as well. But these things happen. Next thing to note is whether they're all the same size. Let's hope they are. So I can just make one jig and use it for all of the holes. Okay, these are about 560 thousandths wide, which will give us a kind of a sliding fit. Maybe a little bit sloppier than that. Just enough clearance so that there's not going to be a problem with it hanging up anywhere. So I'm going to make a custom little routing jig, one-time use, with some inexpensive plywood. To figure out the depth necessary for the bit, I'll put the jig in place with the 2 pieces of tape, which will eventually hold it together. I've got the router bit that I'll use here, which is a small, it's a 3/8 inch diameter bit, sold by Stuart McDonald, not a sponsor, which is good for this kind of thing in that it's, quite narrow and it's not very lengthy. So when you're only doing a shallow little cut like this, it allows me to use 1/2 inch plywood or 12 millimeter plywood rather than having to do a great big deep, lamination of 1 inch or something that the standard pattern maker bits require. So then I'll figure out the depth I want, which will be about 3 millimeters. I'll use the saddle itself as a guide for positioning, checking to see that it's accurately sized, and it is. It's at this point a little voice in my head spoke up and said, "Stop! Stop! Scrap it!" Because I realized suddenly that with a 3/8 inch bit and the template of more than 1/2 inch width, I would not get a clean semicircle on the ends of the slot. There would be a gap there. Thank you, brain. I realized that 560 thousandths is basically 9/16 of an inch. I traced out the saddle outline on a fresh piece of plywood. I'll do this on the drill press. A small mill would be more fun, of course. I don't have a 9/16 router bit on hand, which would be another way of cutting the groove. But with a sharp Forstner or sawtooth bit, I can drill both ends, and then taking a series of very small bites, like a 1/16 of an inch or so, I can work my way along and come up with a very straight, serviceable groove. 2 swipes with a file will straighten out the edges. And we're back to this stage. I'll glue it in place and then remove the saddle. These individual monorail pickups were a Rolf Spooler invention. Really one of the first of their kind. Getting the ground wires back in place. They're hooked into the pilot hole for the screws, so that's how they contact the bridge. A little bit finicky. Also deepens the channel for the detuner adjuster. I have to gather all of the various wires together, and I'll wrap a little piece of tape around them to make it easier to feed into the cavity, where I will strip all of the ends and remember to put the shrink tubing in place before I solder them to their counterparts off the board. I'll pre-tin the wires, which were bare copper, then solder them together. Move the shrink tubing past my terrible hangnails there. Ooh, buddy, come on. And then use my little tiny heat pen to shrink them in place. Okay, fascinating. Strung up. But the action is now too low in a puzzling way. And this is bizarre. You guys saw the action we began with. As we've always discussed, if you want to move the string a certain distance at the 12th fret, we have to double that distance, either up or down, at the saddle. In this case, the action was over 3 millimeters, about 8/64. I wanted to take it down to about 1.5 millimeters, 4/64. To do that, I had to drop the saddle, double the distance. So, 3 millimeters, 8/64. They had to come down, which is what I did. I string it up, and it's as if the thing had perfect action to begin with. As soon as the strings went on, without adjusting the saddles at all, that low E string should have been around 4/64, with the saddle where it was previously, decked out. And the expectation I was going to have to raise it a little bit because this player has strong hands. But no, it's much, much lower. And it seems like the neck has unkinked itself. It's not the relief or the truss rod. That adjustment I did is still right where we put it. It's still 9/1000 relief. The neck didn't magically straighten or back bow. So now I've got to let this sit for a while at full tension to see what it will do. Presumably it's going to resume the shape it had previously, and I will be lowering the saddles. If not, I'm going to have to go back in and make some 1 millimeter shims or something for the pockets I just cut. Because I've had to raise the saddles to their highest possible adjustment to get it to play clean, which it turns out is just under 4/64, which is too low for this player's needs. I can't explain it. Don't know. Anyway, I'll plug it in, you get a sense for the sounds, and then I'm going to put some Icy Hot on my back and pretend I'm Shaquille O'Neal.